Hey everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com and it's time to talk about a massive Monday Night Raw this week. Bloody hell. Yeah, there was lots to look forward to on this week's Monday Night Raw. A lot of big things in store. First of all, it was the return to Madison Square Garden for the first time for a Raw since 2009. Steve Austin was confirmed to appear on the show. We had a huge 4 Horsewomen tag match pitting Charlotte and Becky against Bayley and Sasha. We had Rey Mysterio taking on Gran Metalik in like an ultra lucha clash. We also had a King of the Ring semi-final. There was so much stuff on this show, and it was the Clash of Champions go home as well. Let's not forget about that. So let's get into the opening segment, and of course the glass shattered at Madison Square Garden to kick off the show, and we began things with Stone Cold Steve Austin. First of all, Austin came out, the kind of recent Austin we've seen during the Raw reunion and recent stuff like that. Very loose on the mic, but still as compelling as ever. He first shared a few memories with the crowd regarding Madison Square Garden specifically, such as facing Bret Hart at Survivor Series, the moment where he got goosebumps and realized this is the big time, the moment that he was knocked out against The Undertaker at SummerSlam, legitimately knocked out, and also the moment when he hit Vince McMahon with the first ever stunner taken by Mr. McMahon. Thankfully, didn't share any stories of him and Gerald Briscoe in South Africa, because back at the Raw reunion it did seem like he was about to reveal that they may have done something a bit illegal, but thankfully he was kind of cut off before that. Austin then says, right, let's get down to business. It's time to do the contract signing for the Universal Championship. First one out, the contender Braun Strowman. Strowman came out. Austin, did not shake his hand for whatever reason. I actually felt quite sorry for Braun in this segment at various stages. Then Rollins came out and Austin did shake his hand, but thankfully also did shake Strowman's hand too. If he hadn't shaken Strowman's hand, I'd have penalised this whole segment about 3 grade brackets. Rollins then, so Rollins gets on the mic, okay, and just basically says, Braun, you're being paranoid. Austin, look, Steve, look, he thinks we're in cahoots, me and you. He thinks that you've got my back. He thinks you're my boy. And thereby proving that, yes, Austin and Rollins are acting like best pals. Braun probably has a bit of a point here. Rollins tells Strowman, look, Braun, no one's going to stab you in the back. You're being paranoid, you big lug, but I am still the best wrestler in the world. And after Clash of Champions, I am going to still be the Universal Champion. And he signs the contract and gets a nice big smarky boo from the MSG crowd, because lest we forget, it's one of those cities where they just love to cheer who they usually boo and boo who they'd usually cheer. Ha 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 ha. Braun, on the other hand, says, Austin, you're one of my heroes. I grew up watching you, but a rattlesnake is always a rattlesnake, and I'm going to open a can of whoop-ass on Seth Rollins at Clash of Champions. And that gets a big, smarky MSG cheer. Ha, they boo who they usually cheer. No, the whole reason that they're cheering Strowman here, I don't think is because they're smarks. I think it's because Rollins is kind of an arrogant, very cocky, dominant champion who openly states that he's the best wrestler in the world, and Strowman's a massive 7-foot giant who breaks things and throws people around. Which one are you more likely to cheer? And then they are interrupted by my MVP of this entire segment, AJ Styles, flanked of course by Gallows and Anderson. And Styles comes down to the ring and just cuts a promo on everybody involved, including Austin, especially Austin in fact. He mimics Austin, he mocks the what chants from the crowd, and obviously they give it back to him tenfold, and slowly they make their way down the ramp and into the ring. And at one point, my favourite bit is when Austin just kind of improvises a little bit, and it adds a lot to the segment whenever he does. He gets on the mic and says, AJ, if you want them to stop watting you, why don't you put a little bass in your voice, son? And AJ, in the nerdiest but most hilarious fashion as well, goes, why don't you shut up, Steve? Seems like a little brother being scolded by his older brother, but it comes across so petty and so excellent. I just absolutely loved it. But yes, the OC get in the ring, and Austin is just slowly moving the contract signing table out the way, and the babyfaces charge and attack the heels. Strowman deals with Gallows and Anderson and kind of chases Anderson up the ramp, leaving the other 3 alone in the ring. Rollins goes for the stomp, but AJ Styles moves out the way, throws Rollins over the top rope, and turns right into a classic Stone Cold Stunner, which he sells very well. Austin gets the beers in, phones up the beers, well, hey, that's one for you old What Culture fans. Phones up the beers, and basically that's the end of the segment. Him and Rollins enjoying a beer and heading to the back. This gets a B+. It wasn't a perfect opening segment. It was kind of loose and ragged at points, but that was also its strength as well as its weakness. It kind of had the energy of an old school Attitude Era opening segment, and maybe that was just because Austin was there, but I still enjoyed it a lot as a result. Next up, we got our first match of the night, Cedric Alexander versus AJ Styles, who is still, remember, laid out from the Stone Cold Stunner. Now you might be thinking, wow, what a dick Cedric is for running out and trying to take advantage of the entire situation, but remember actually that last week the OC did beat down Cedric backstage backstage for seemingly no reason, so Cedric does have legitimate beef there. Cedric has control for much of this match, partly because AJ has already been weakened by Austin in the opening segment, and partly just because he's Cedric Alexander and he's so full of babyface fire, especially in the Garden. He actually looks like he's about to win the match at several stages, but eventually the OC have had enough. Gallows and Anderson, they come out, drag him off the apron and beat him down until he's saved by the Viking experience, the Viking Raiders. This gets a B- because it was more of a storyline device setting up for the main event later on than an actual match. And it would have been great to see Cedric versus AJ in singles competition, but I suspect we're probably going to see that on Sunday. More on that in a little bit. Also, the Viking Raiders saving Cedric is an interesting choice. I guess they are babyface now, as I suggested last week, and Matthew scoffed at me for some reason, because he's a dick. And it seems as though the Viking Raiders are indeed good guys. It does make a little bit of sense, actually, because they did have that little clash with the OC in that big tag team turmoil match. Was it 2 weeks ago now? So it kind of implies, I guess, that they've just turned babyface by happenstance. They've accidentally turned babyface, and that's totally fine. Segment gets a B-. It was okay, but it led to bigger things later on. I should point out as well, before someone pointed out for me in the comments, that the Viking Raiders did also beat that jobber heel team last week, but I wasn't certain whether that was a fully fledged babyface turn or not, just because they beat them down for being Pittsburgh guys in Baltimore, and that would have certainly turned them face in Baltimore, but they'd have remained heel in Pittsburgh, so I needed more clarity, and this Raw has provided that clarity. Thank you very much. Next up, we get Roman Reigns, who comes out for a very serious and important segment. He talks a little bit about his own battles with leukemia, and then says he's been visiting pediatric cancer charities to pay forward the support that he was given when he was undergoing his own battle. He then brings out several kids from those charities. They get their own little entrance, and they're wearing, ring attire and stuff, and it's really, really nice. Obviously, I'm not going to give this segment a grade, but it was a very important and touching message. Next up, the second match of the night, the big 4 Horsewomen tag team clash, pitting Sasha and Bayley, the newly heel Bayley, against the team of Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch, who we can just tell still don't get along from one little silent backstage segment where Becky was just taping her fists, not taking her eyes off Charlotte for 1 second. This match had a big fight feel from the off, before the bell rang. The baby faces, if we can call Charlotte a babyface, I guess, they jumped the heels on the ramp and started to beat them down, but the heels managed to isolate them and pick them off one by one, and then get Becky in the ring and start using the numbers advantage against her. But then Charlotte got back in the ring with a steel chair and scared them off, and they scattered to the outside. And then finally, the bell rang and the match actually got underway. So it was a bit of a frantic start, but one which gave the match the right kind of energy, I think. This was a pretty long match, but a very intense one, and they managed to keep the crowd's attention for most of it, I will say. I mean, they're 4 of the biggest stars in the entire roster, regardless of whether they're in the women's or men's division. Becky, Charlotte, Sasha, and Bayley are pretty big. I mean, some of them bigger than others, of course. Becky is on another level right now this year, but they're all big stars in their own right. There were some cool and inventive spots in this one as well, such as Charlotte trapping Sasha in the figure 8, only for Bayley to run in to try and break it up, but then Becky grabbed Bayley and tried to swing her into the disarm her, and it looked like they were going to do the old classic spot of both the baby faces have both the heels in simultaneous submissions, but that's not what happened at all, because Bayley just turned her hips and kind of launched Becky right into the submission that was going on. I really liked that one. Very Revival-esque. Later on, quite an important point, I think, in the build towards Clash of Champions on Sunday, Becky managed to get Sasha Banks in the disarmer on the outside, and Sasha did tap out, but obviously with it being outside of the ring, it didn't actually prove anything, but I think it's a nice little added touch heading into Sunday. The ending came with Bayley going for a big elbow drop on Charlotte, but Charlotte was able to get the knees up, knock Sasha off the apron, and then Bayley went for a roll up on Charlotte, but Charlotte fought her off, hit the natural selection, and picked up the clean victory for her team. Like the opening segment, this gets a B+, and it was similar to the opening segment in that it was intense but imperfect as well, I will say. There were some spots that didn't quite work, such as Charlotte's moonsault, where instead of landing flat on her opponent, she kind of just landed on her feet and then fell into a pinfall, which was a little bit strange. But apart from that, it was a really intense match. It progressed both storylines nicely heading into Clash of Champions, and it gave 4 of the biggest stars a lot of time, a nice big spotlight to thrive under. This match was between 15 and 20 minutes, amid criticism that the women's division hasn't been getting enough time, which isn't exactly unfounded criticism, but I think that they addressed it quite well on today's show. Today's show, last night's show, whatever, you know what I mean. Next up, let's go back in time to the late 90s to WCW for a Cruiserweight match featuring Rey Mysterio Jr. No, this was Rey Mysterio versus Gran Metalik in a match that did feel like it was ripped straight out of the Nitro playbook. It was quite odd. And for about 5 minutes or so, the pair did do good lucha things. They reminded us all, well, Rey didn't need to remind anybody how great he is, but Gran Metalik reminded us all, myself included, because I'd forgotten just how good he is. He had a great super kick at one point, a great tope to the outside, the nice little rope walk thing that he does around the corner. I mean, he's spot on when he's on his game, and we'd all kind of forgotten about that. I guess that may have been the point of the match, reminding us all how great Gran Metalik is, while also showing that Rey has still got, to quote Mark Henry, plenty left in the tank. I would love it if Rey teased a retirement in a pink suit and then slammed John Cena. I want it more than words now. But for all of Metalik's good efforts, it wasn't quite enough to pick up the victory. Instead, it was Rey who won the match with his little, moves of doom, the 619, the frog splash and everything. And then they showed respect to each other after the match, which was really nice. It gets a B grade, it was fast, it was pretty good action. It didn't go on quite long enough for my liking, but apart from that, I have no complaints at all. Next up, we get that controversial triple threat King of the Ring semi-final set up last week when Ricochet and Joe pinned each other at the same time, which you might think would mean they were both eliminated and Corbin progresses straight to the final, but no! Instead, it was turned into a triple threat match between Corbin, Ricochet and Joe for this week's show. I really enjoyed this match as well. It was a very fun one, and Baron Corbin was getting dueling chants in MSG. Let's go Corbin. Corbin sucks. Let's go Corbin in MSG. Actually, to be fair, MSG is probably not the most surprising place for this to happen, but it does stand testament to the fact that Corbin's heel run in this King of the Ring tournament has been a breath of fresh air for him. His in-ring ability has clearly improved somewhat, I'd say at least, and also I guess people are just more accepting of him now in a more standard heel role rather than the heel who would take over the show all the time or forever be associated with Shane McMahon, who we also don't like very much in that kind of role. But now he's just a standard bully arsehole heel. I think everyone's getting behind it. He's good at it. Things get quite hectic when Joe clamps the coquina clutch onto Baron Corbin on the outside, and they do an excellent job, the pair of them, of teasing Corbin, being able to get out of the hold. He rams Joe into various, the ring post, the crowd barrier, the other crowd barrier, but Joe hangs on going no, you're staying here with me. Corbin passes out, and just as he's about to fully pass out on the outside, Ricochet runs off the apron with a jumping, a running shooting star press, lands on both, and it seems like Ricochet is heading towards victory. But if you've watched wrestling before, that's not quite the case. That's the thing, as a lot of you will know, once you've watched enough wrestling, you do get a feel for the certain rhythms and ebbs and flows of a match and how that plays into the booking convention of the promotion you might be watching at that time. That's exactly what happened here, because the moment that Baron Corbin was out on the outside, I thought, his chances of winning have just gone up rather than down, which you'd logically assume otherwise. Sure enough, Ricochet managed to get the better of Joe in the ring, hit the big 630 senton, and just when he was about to make the pinfall, Baron Corbin had recovered, yanked Ricochet out of the ring, launched him into the front row, and stole the pinfall for himself, progressing to the King of the Ring final on Sunday. This gets a B+. Originally I was going to give it lower, but I realised that I'm just torn, and that was me being petty because Ricochet was my pick, and that's who I wanted to win the whole thing. But if I put all that aside, there was nothing wrong with this match. It was fun, it was inventive at points, and it was really intense towards the end. No one quite knew who was going to win. I know a lot of you will be like, of course Baron Corbin's going to win, but watching it, I genuinely didn't know who was going to win for a lot of it. Corbin goes on to the final, which I think is a great reward for him after the great work he's been doing over the past few weeks. Do I think he should win the tournament? No, I think he should be used to elevate whoever he faces in the final. I think that will be better. Hopefully, Chad Gable. But I know that King of the Ring is more set up for a heel to win. I just think that Chad Gable would benefit from the victory a lot more than Baron Corbin would. Next up, Lacy Evans versus Natalya in a rematch from last week, which Lacy Evans won. This time, it's just Natalya getting her win back. The match is totally fine. Lacy has been a lot better recently than we're used to seeing her, but at the same time, the crowd just weren't into it at all. There were a few CM Punk chants, which I don't think Lacy or Natalya really deserved, given that they were clearly putting an effort in the middle of the ring. After a few minutes, Natalya, ensnares her in the sharpshooter, and Lacy Evans taps out clean. I'm going to give this a C. I don't really see the point of it. If you're going to give Lacey the win over Natalya last week, then what's the point of just giving Natalya the clean win straight back the week after. It's why 50-50 booking is so criticised when it means nothing in the long run. The match was okay though, the action was fine, so I think a C is probably a fair grade. Next up, we get a recap of what happened before the Raw broadcast started, which was 24/7 championship shenanigans. Right, so there was a bit of a debate in the office about the pronunciation of this name, and I'm disappointed in myself. As one of the resident NBA fans in the office, I thought it was Enes Kanter. Apparently it's Enes Kanter, formerly of the New York Knicks, so obviously he was going to get a great reception in the Garden. Except no, he wasn't, because he's just signed for the Boston Celtics. And if you know anything about American sports, teams from Boston and teams from New York tend not to like each other very much. So anyway, Kanter was in the ring and R-Truth came out and basically said, oh, I'm a big fan, just want to say, you know, thank you for everything you did for the New York Knicks. Everyone give him a round of applause, yo. And then Kanter just went, bang, just pie-faced him straight in the face. And that was enough to keep R-Truth down for the 3. I know the dude's like 7 foot tall, but R-Truth's a professional wrestler. Then again, in TNA, R-Truth did once lose a match to a NASCAR driver, so maybe he's just got a bad track record against athletes in other sports. So Enes Kanter was now the new 24/7 champion, but then R-Truth rolled him up almost immediately and headed to the back, doing a little jig in the process. He is again the 24/7 champion. Now let's try and figure out what kind of grade to give this. I'm going to give it a C-. I'm finding myself starting to lose a little bit of enthusiasm for the 24/7 division, and it's for 2 reasons mainly. The first reason is that I just think it could be more. It could be more than it is. There could be a lot more scope given to the 24/7 division. I've just had a little vision like months ago now, and I just want to see it happen, of like people teaming up and little factions forming to get the title off somebody. Maybe the champion hiring people to protect him. Raids on hotel rooms in the middle of the night, or like car chases, or anything they can get away with, really. I just think that would be absolutely awesome, and I think that if they brought in more people rather than just basing it entirely around Truth and Drake Maverick, who've been doing a wonderful job, but I think if they widen the scope and widen the budget maybe, I think this could be something even more hilarious and amazing. Instead, we've kind of got these celebrity cameos, which I get from a PR standpoint, but at the same time, it's just not as entertaining for the wrestling fan. My other reason is that now that non-wrestlers are winning it, like sports anchors and NBA players and all that sort of stuff, I'm just kind of bitter because neither of those men who've won it so far, those non-wrestlers, have actually ever held a 24/7 championship beforehand. They've never got any prior experience in that, and I do. And even though that's not the main reason, I think that that's pretty much the main reason. Next up, we're really glad to be your friend, because this is a friendship that'll never... It's the Firefly Fun House with Bray Wyatt, and I don't really know what to say because things got a little bit cryptic this week. Bray Wyatt is warned by his cast of puppet friends of stranger danger, and he's like, well, you've seen a stranger? Was it Stone Cold Steve Austin? Because Austin appeared on Raw this week. And then one of them, I think it was Mercy the Buzzard maybe? No, it wasn't. It was Abby. One of the characters' clock has been stopped on 316 since Austin was there, and Wyatt goes, I'll fix it, hits it with a hammer, and now it's stuck on 1119. Now there's already a lot of theories floating around online as to what 1119 actually means. Some people are suggesting that it could mean November 2019, the 11th month of the year, of course, which is when Survivor Series is, so maybe Wyatt's next big match after that one advertised for Hell in a Cell is going to be at Survivor Series. Maybe there's something big in store. It could also mean, you know, the 19th of November, the date itself, but that's a Tuesday, and by that point SmackDown will be on Fridays, so I'm not quite certain whether that one's very likely. And people obviously went the biblical route because of the biblical background to Austin's 316 catchphrase. I think he mentioned John 316 in the promo just before that, so people are now assuming that this could be something 1119 for Bray Wyatt. I took a look at what John 1119 is. It's, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. So that one's a little bit too cryptic for my small, simple brain, but a lot of people online have instead said it could be Ezekiel 11:19, which is, I will give them an undivided heart and put a new spirit in them. I will remove from them their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. That sounds far more Bray Wyatt. That sounds way less specific in a good wrestling way. It wasn't mentioning names like Martha and Mary to try and tie things down to a specific storyline. This is far more pro wrestling-y, and I'm fully behind it. This segment anyway gets a B. It was less gripping immediately than usual, but that's because the whole 11:19 thing is yet to to play out, and I'm excited to see where it goes, and of course Bray was as charismatic as ever. And finally, a big 10-man tag team match to end the show, a big fun baby faces versus heels, big old brawl to close the Madison Square Garden show. On the babyface side of things, we had Strowman, Rollins, Cedric Alexander and the Viking Raiders taking on the heel team of Dolph Ziggler, Robert Roode, AJ Styles, Anderson and Gallows. The two heel factions had aligned briefly and tentatively earlier backstage. At times this match felt like a traditional Survivor Series match, but without the eliminations, of course. A good one, a good traditional Survivor Series match, not a weird one like when it all became about Triple H and Shane McMahon for some reason and nobody actually cared that much and it never got followed up on. But yes, this match did a good job of developing several new themes heading into Clash of Champions, such as, I've written a few down, Rollins and Strowman being good tag partners. They're doing this thing now where Rollins will do a suicide dive, and then as the opponent's recovering, Strowman will charge around the ring and just take them out in his nice signature spot that he does. That's a good double team little sequence that they've got going on there. But also another theme that this match kind of suggested is that they're bad tag team partners, because Rollins was thrown backwards onto Strowman, who was in the middle of a pinfall attempt, and Strowman blamed him for it. So, ooh, can they coexist? I know it's a cliched storyline, but it's one that you've got to develop heading into the pay-per-view. It also continued the feud a little bit between the Viking Raiders and the OC. Hopefully we get to see a big match between those boys in the future, hopefully with a no DQ stipulation. I really want to see them just go hell for leather on one another. And it also, most importantly perhaps, continued the theme of Cedric Alexander having AJ Styles' number. He picked up the big babyface win for his team, hitting the lumbar check, which Styles sold to perfection in the middle of the ring. And surely this means that Cedric's going to get a US title shot at Clash of Champions. Cedric's theme doesn't even play, because as soon as it has Austin, like a dad who's just too eager to carry on drinking with the boys, like the music hits and Austin just sprints out there. He's ready for a big beer bash with all the baby faces. So that's, that's nice to see. We also had a dark segment after the show, which I'm not going to take into account, of course, because it was kind of non-canon, of Austin inviting AJ Styles into the ring, putting him over hugely on the mic as a great wrestler, and then hitting him with a stunner to pop the crowd. But this segment ended basically with Rollins, Strowman, Austin, Cedric, and the two Viking Raiders all having a nice old time in the ring, and Cedric surely on the cusp of getting that US title shot on Sunday. This segment gets a B+. Congratulations to Cedric for not only being Steve Austin's new best friend and adopted son, but also as well for now sharing Steve Austin's theme music. That's pretty cool. And yeah, it brought the end to what was, I think, a largely fun Monday Night Raw. Overall, I'm going to give this show a B+. I gave B+ to a lot of segments on this video, and I think overall they did reflect the quality of the show from start to finish. It was a fun show, an occasionally intense one too, and I think things are building nicely towards Clash of Champions. Of course, we won't really know how well it pays off until Sunday, but until then, let me know what you think in the comments below, and thank you for watching. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.